Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar where we will discuss things to do before going agile. My name is Arne Olander, and the webinar is delivered in cooperation between AgiVetta Consulting and my company Accurate. So before we start, I would like every attendee to think about questions that you want answered to during this webinar, and after spending 10-15 seconds thinking about the questions, please write down the most important question. And after writing down your question, please keep it available, and if you get an answer to it during the webinar, that's good. If not, we will end by having a Q&A session, so you get the opportunity to ask questions. Some may argue that things to do before you go agile is a topic too late to discuss, since Agile has been on the scene since the 1990s, and the term was coined in 2001, and many companies have started working according to Agile. However, in my mind, it is never too late to prepare. And I see different scenarios where the question about how to prepare for Agile is relevant. So one scenario, for example, is a company that is interested in implementing Agile, that have not done it yet, have heard about it, and for them, of course, the topic is important right now. Another scenario is a company which has already implemented Agile, or at least started their implementation. For them, it may be good advice to revisit this question in order to make sure that they did the right preparations, and if not, give themselves an opportunity to prepare for the rest of their journey. So it's never too late to prepare for the rest of your journey. Today, many teams, many companies, many organizations are turning to Agile product development. Among the most popular choices is Scrum. And Scrum and other Agile ways of working give several promises. Still, it's good to not just dive into it without any preparation. So it is good advice to do a couple of things before you go Agile. So in the following, I will list and discuss 5 things to do before you go Agile. The first thing is identify your why, and I will get into detail about all of these things as we go along. Number 2, inform and educate. Number 3, define your engineering practices, the practices that you need to use to produce your product or your service. Number 4, define your product backlog, the things that you need to do. What are the things, and in what order should you do the things? That's what you can use a product backlog for, and should use a product backlog for. Number 5, set your definition of done. Because if we work according to Agile, we definitely want to get results incrementally. After each iteration, we want to have something that is ready. And we want to hear from the development team. Now we're done. And we need to be clear about what is it. So definition of done. The first thing on my list, identify your why. So to me, Agile in itself is not a goal. Therefore, it is really important to understand and know why you want to go Agile in order to get a successful implementation. And also, it's really good to understand what benefits you expect from going Agile. So we may ask ourselves, why Agile? I always ask my customers, when we first meet, I ask them, why Agile? Or if they are more into Scrum than general Agile, I ask them, why Scrum? And sometimes they look surprised and say, you should know that. And of course, I know a couple of good reasons to implement Agile or Scrum. But I tell my customers that, of course, I know that. And I also know what kind of things they want to harvest or may be able to harvest from using Agile. And I also know that different organizations may have different answers, and that's why I ask, because I want my customers to be clear about why, and I believe that I will be better suited to help them if they tell me their reasons. So at this point, I would like for all of you listening to think about reasons for Agile. Why did your company want to use Agile to manage and control product development? Or why are you considering doing so? And please use the chat window to the bottom right and enter some of the reasons that you have heard or can think about. And I will read them as we go about. So on the bottom of the control panel, you should see a chat window, and there it says type message here. So you could type any reasons that you have heard about in your company, or that you can figure out why would it be good for our company to go Agile. So I don't see any things written in the chat box yet. So please do that. And while we're waiting for anyone writing anything, I will start talking a little about some generic reasons that I have come upon. So one really clear reason is shortened time to market. To do the absolute necessary things to get our product on the market and avoid the not valuable things. Increase control of a project. If you're using projects to manage your way of developing products, the control may not be the best. You may have a sense of control, but it may not be a real control. So by taking small steps and checking, using those small steps as checking points, you can increase your control of a project. Increase the quality of the product by constantly checking the results after each iteration and allowing your customers and the stakeholders to take part of that. Reduce the risk. Maximize return on investment so that we really do the valuable stuff and avoid the not so valuable stuff. Increase probability of success. So those are a couple of reasons that I have heard customers saying when I ask them why Agile. A couple of other reasons: customers, users, and stakeholders are active participants throughout the project. If we use Agile in the way it's intended, then you need customers, you need users, you need stakeholders to be active participants throughout the project. And if you want them to be that, then Agile can be one. That can be a good reason to work according to Agile, because they can utilize their participation. Requirements change rapidly. That is one reason why we want to take the small steps. Primary focus is on software development rather than processes or documentation. If we want to focus on software development, if we want to get the result, and we're not as inclined to focus on processes or documentation, then Agile is very suitable. Aim is for simplicity in terms of tools and models used. If you aim to use as simple tools as possible, as simple models as possible, then Agile will probably be right for your company as well. So when I ask my customers about why Agile, it's good to have an answer. And I ask this because Agile is not a goal in itself. And also, it's good to talk to customers about possible reasons, possible benefits of Agile. So this is another opportunity for you to use the chat box and write down possible benefits from working according to Agile. So you can use the chat box to the bottom where it says type message here, and write down good possible benefits of Agile. And I'm talking about possible benefits because what is a benefit for one company may not necessarily be a benefit for every other company. And that's something to remember. So my pre-prepared list, possible benefits of Agile: you get simplicity and you get transparency, because you see after each short iteration how much you have actually produced, and you can also see the quality of that. So you can make a decision if you are on the right quality level or if you need to fix something before you take further steps in the direction you want to take. Higher customer satisfaction. If we involve our customers and our stakeholders and our users constantly during product development, we increase the probability of higher customer satisfaction. Greater staff morale and staff retention. Working according to Agile, according to many, make it more fun to develop products, because you get feedback more often, you get discussions with your customers or your stakeholders, and you get the possibility to see how they appreciate or not appreciate what you've done, so that you can do it right. Improved quality deliverables, I touched upon before. Improved business value, because we constantly discuss what is useful and what is of value, we can get that. And possible benefit of Agile is a quicker return on investment. Increased productivity and decreased development costs may not be the main reason, but it is a possible benefit that you get as a bonus. And of course, the ability to rapidly change direction. So we don't want to invest too much in going in a certain direction. Instead, we want to be able to change direction if needed, not just because it's fun, but when it's needed. So a lot of talk about the need to understand why we are implementing Agile. We've also listed possible benefits from implemented Agile. And what I want to share now are some words about how to go about. And remember, what I'm suggesting are exactly that, suggestions. You need to come up with your exact ways of going about. If you're able to be truly agile in your implementation, you will do it with frequent inspection and adaptation. So you can actually use Agile to implement Agile by taking small steps in a wanted direction. We also, so first of all, what I like to do is to be clear about your vision for implementing Agile. Why do you want to do it? What are the reasons? We talked about that. And what will things look like when you have implemented it? So it's good to be clear about where you're going, your vision for the implementation. And to me, that should include the answer to why Agile. And this is also something that gives you the base for your inspection. Are we moving in the right direction? Are we on track? So define your vision, be clear about where you want to go with your implementation of Agile. And then, or maybe even before that, create a guiding coalition. The term guiding coalition comes from John Kotter and his book Leading Change. And a guiding coalition is the oversight team for the change effort. And it should consist of skilled, credible, and influential managers and leaders. And they should have the mandate to support the change initiative or the change effort. So the guiding coalition should, one, keep the change effort on target, and give the support to those implementing Agile, and two, help target organizational resistance, and maybe also help understand organizational resistance, and be clear about why Agile, and help people understand the possible benefits that you see. That may not be in line with individuals' way of looking upon things, but it's hard to be part of something if there is not a clear goal, a clear vision of what you want to do. So define your vision, talk about where you want to go, create a guiding coalition, senior people with decision power, credible, skilled, and influential managers and leaders. And make a note that I say managers and leaders. So leaders doesn't have to be managers, and not all managers are leaders. In the best of cases, they are, but it may not be enough with only managers. So also informal leaders in your organization may be good to have. Okay, so what we have done now, we have talked about why Agile, and that's one thing to prepare for before you go Agile, because if you don't know why, it's really hard to do a good implementation. So what I would like to ask you to do now is to write down things that you have received from this first part. Maybe some ideas about what you can do for the future, maybe a reminder of things that you want to remember doing as you go along, maybe your reasons for going Agile. Number 2 on my list is inform and educate. So maybe we need to inform and educate people in our organization about Agile. What is Agile? What are the Agile values? What are the Agile principles? And it's good for everyone to better understand our reasons for implementing Agile and what Agile is. And inform and educate, I think, is good because Agile ways of working do often include different ways of thinking and doing than traditional product development. So therefore, inform and educate and train the team or teams turning Agile, as well as the rest of the organization, because Agile development is not only about the development team. It's not only about the product owner and the development team. If you implement Scrum, it's not only about the Scrum Master, the development team, and the product owner. It's also about other parts of your organization, because they will be affected. They are our stakeholders, and as a product owner, you should represent stakeholders. You should listen to stakeholders, and you should figure out what they value, and then base your product vision and your product backlog upon that. So every part of your organization benefits from understanding what Agile is and what to do if they get close to it. They may not always want to touch it, and that's kind of joking, because Agile is more than an it, of course. And so Agile development will not only have an effect on the development department, IT department, but also on the business side of our organization and other parts of the organization. Therefore, have people being informed and educated to a certain level. Maybe you don't need to educate the rest of the organization in details about engineering practices, for example. But you may need to educate them about why they should give their requirements and their expectations to the product owner and not to the development team directly. So those are a couple of things that you may want to inform and educate your organization about. So that was number 2 on my list of things to do before you go Agile. Number 3, define your engineering practices. One of the important parts of Agile are the engineering practices. In Extreme Programming, XP, for example, the engineering practices, they are an integral part. In Scrum, it's up to the development team or the organization to choose which practices to use. And most organizations already developing products, they have practices and they have tools. And it's good to be clear about that. And then what you can do, if it's Extreme Programming or Scrum or any other Agile way of working, you benefit from having a baseline of existing practices. What are the practices we're using to develop our product? That could be just some coding guidelines, for example, but it could be other stuff as well. It could be continuous integration, continuous deployment, automated tests, pair programming, and so on, to give you a couple of examples. So have a baseline of existing practices, and then a plan on which practices to add, which practices to introduce, which practices to change, which practices to stop using, because we may not benefit from doing that. So baseline, current practices, and a plan on how to expand on good engineering practices. And that may be more cumbersome than we expect from the beginning, although it is really necessary. Good engineering practices will help us to become agile in a better way. So that's something to remember as well. So this was number 3 on my list. Define your engineering practices. Number 4 on the list is define your product backlog. And you could say that I'm cheating a little when I say define your product backlog, because it may be hard to define a product backlog before you have a product vision. So I will mention the product vision in this as well. To me, the product backlog is perhaps the most important artifact in any type of Agile implementation, because it contains the what of product development. It should be based on the product vision, and it should constantly be up to date. A good product backlog have different granularity of the different items on it. The things that we are expected to do next iteration or the iteration after that should be small enough to bring into that iteration, small enough to finish in that iteration, and small enough for us to be able to bring in many items to the iteration. And when I say many, it's not hundreds. 5, 10, 15, depending on the product, of course. And we need to learn how much is a good number of items to bring in. But definitely more than 1, definitely more than 2, because then we are able to be more flexible. The other parts of the product backlog, the things that we are supposed to implement later, but not next sprint and not the sprint after that either, they may not be as granular. They do not necessarily need to be as small, and they do definitely not need to have as much detail. But since we are pulling from the product backlog for each iteration, those bigger items further down, they need to be refined as we go along. So that's an activity, product backlog refinement, that you want to do on a constant basis, so that you get the details just in time for the iteration where you're supposed to implement the items. Any team having a product backlog that is current and up to date will be better at increasing their productivity. Things to remember: a good product backlog should be supported by a product vision. The product vision, that helps us to communicate and understand who, what, and why. Who are we building the product for? Target customers, target users. What is the product and why are we building it? Why will the world become a better place if we build this product? So the product vision will help teams to guide teams to develop the product in the right way, in the right direction. And it will help development teams to stay focused on what they're doing. And it will help stakeholders to align, to understand. And every new requirement, if you ask me, I think that every new requirement, every new expectation, every new idea of what we can do with the product, how we can make it better, you should check with the product vision. So if we do this new thing, does that help us to fulfill the product vision? Does that help us to reach the product vision? If not, then you should not do it. So, 4 things we have talked about: identify your why, inform and educate, define your engineering practices, and define your product backlog. Now we're going to talk about item number 5 on the list of 5 things to do before you go agile. And item number 5 you should see on your screen right now. Set your definition of done. So in Agile, we want frequent feedback, both on what we have developed and also on how we are working. So one way of getting feedback on what we have developed is actually to demonstrate the results after each iteration. So a demo, if you talk about Scrum, you have the meeting that you call, or the event that you call sprint review, which usually includes some sort of demonstration of what we created, what is working after the last sprint, after the last iteration. And also the opportunity for stakeholders, customers, users, external stakeholders, internal stakeholders, and of course the product owner to give feedback on what we have developed. So the development team should focus on developing a working product increment that is possible to demonstrate and deliver after each iteration. And of course, towards the end of the iteration, we want to hear the development team saying, now we're done. And what does that mean? Developing a definition of done helps the team to focus, and it helps stakeholders to know on what level they should give feedback as well. Imagine going to a car wash service, and if you order a basic car wash, what you can expect is for the company to put water on the car, to rinse the car, and then to put foam on the car to clean it, and then to put more water on the car to get rid of the dirt and the foam. Of course, what you may want to do, but you don't necessarily need to do if you have a basic car washing service, is also to dry the car. So if I'm the customer, I will inspect the outside of the car. But I will not inspect the inside of the car because that's not part of the service. So if instead I was ordering a super duper extra deluxe royal car wash, then that may have included hoovering, cleaning the inside as well, so I can inspect that. And the same goes for products. Our definition of done helps us to understand on what level to inspect the results. And it also helps everyone involved to understand how much work the development team is forced to save until after the iteration. Definition of done tells us these are the things that we do on a consistent basis every sprint. So, for example, if we talk about software development, of course we have requirements. That's the product backlog. Of course we implement, we code. We may include code review in our definition of done. If we do that, then we do code review. After code review, we probably do testing. But not every team are able to do all of their tests within each of their iterations. So my usual example is for regression tests, for example. And regression test, a team may not be able to do that within the sprint. So then it should not be included in our definition of done. But of course, before we can release to our customers, we need to do regression tests. So we are forced to save that until after the iteration. And in the best of worlds, we can extend our definition of done, and we can learn how to actually be able to do regression tests within the iteration, so that when we say we're done, we are even more done than before. So set your definition of done. 5 things to do before you go agile. Identify your why, inform and educate, define your engineering practices, define your product backlog, and set your definition of done. You may not need to do all of these things, even though I strongly recommend it. And you may need to do even more. Be careful, though, not to do too much, because it's so easy to be in preparation mode forever and not getting into value production, producing value. So I argue that if a company do these things to prepare for Agile, they will be better suited to implement Agile and also harvest the possible benefits from working according to Agile. If you take a look at this list, you see number 3, define your engineering practices. That is something that you may want to do. And as I said before, find your baseline. What are the engineering practices that we're using right now? And then identify what can we do to become even better, so that we have a plan for expanding our engineering practices and using the right ones. Maybe there are emerging technology, emerging practices that we benefit from doing. So a couple of years ago, a lot of companies, they struggle with continuous integration. Today, companies have come further. So today we talk about continuous deployment and continuous releases. And as a basis for that, of course, you need to have continuous integration. So practices, they emerge. Above number 3, we have number 2, inform and educate. This, I suggest, should involve information and education regarding the values and principles of the Agile Manifesto, or Manifesto for Agile Software Development, as is the correct term. So what I have here is a word cloud, and this word cloud is actually words from the Agile Manifesto, or Manifesto for Agile Software Development. And I would like to spend a couple of minutes talking about the Agile values and the Agile principles, just to give you an idea about what I mean about informing and educating. And this is an example. You need to you may need to inform and educate about more things. So Manifesto for Agile Software Development. You find it, you see the link, agilemanifesto.org at the bottom of this page. In February 2001, this was coined, Agile. And the people, the 17 people participating in coining the term, they said the following: we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others to do it. Through this work, we have come to value. And they say individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And my take on this is that processes and tools, we can have the best processes and the best tools in the world, and that can only get us so far. We also need skilled individuals that are able to collaborate with each other, individuals and interactions. That's usually the success factor. Then they said that they value working software over comprehensive documentation. This is not black or white. So this is not either working software or comprehensive documentation. It's about maybe both, because the product we are developing should decide how much documentation we need. And the most comprehensive documentation in the world will not be enough if we don't have working product after each iteration. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. We cannot always come up with all different things that may happen and what to do about that. So contract negotiation is not necessarily about the contract negotiation between a customer and a vendor. It may also be the internal contract negotiation that you have within the company, where a certain department needs to supply people to do the development and also to be on the team. Even if we have a very perfect agreement or a contract, we still need to collaborate with the customer. If you take a look at Scrum, we say that the product owner in Scrum should represent stakeholders, including customers. So it's probably collaboration with the product owner that we are talking about. And number 4 on this list of 4, responding to change over following a plan. So instead of making a detailed plan from the first step to the last step, we have a rough plan and we respond to change. So I usually say to myself, responding to change over strictly following an initial plan. Because of course we have plans in Agile. Of course we follow plans. And then the last part, the last sentence of the Manifesto for Agile Software Development, when we talk about the values, is that is, while there is value on the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. So it's not black and white. It's not all the things on the right and nothing on the left, or all the things to the left and nothing to the right. It's a gradual scale, and one company may want to put some focus on processes and tools for different reasons, but they should never forget about individuals and interactions. For a long period of time, when it comes to software development, companies have been good at focusing on processes and tools, comprehensive documentation, contract negotiation, and following a plan. Now it's time to focus on individuals and interactions, working software, customer collaboration, and responding to change, and focus even more on that. And now this has been true for a long time. It still is true. There is not only the values in the manifesto for Agile software development, there are also some principles. So let me talk shortly about the 12 principles. The first one, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. So Agile Manifesto is focused on software. You may use Agile for developing other types of products as well. So then you may say valuable product or valuable product increment. But notice a couple of words here. Highest priority, satisfy the customer. So it's customer-centric. Satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. So deliver value early and continuously, and do that to satisfy the customer. This is one of the 12 principles. Very important to remember because it's so easy to forget. Number 2, welcome changing requirements, even late in development. And after reading this much, many people, they say, well, late in development, it's hard to change late during development, and it's even hard to welcome changes late in development. So the second sentence here, agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. If there are good reasons for changing, then of course we should welcome the change because it's good for the customer. And then we need to design for change. We need to build an incremental architecture, for example. We need to figure out how much architecture can we do up front, or do we need to do up front? We may not need to do a full-fledged architecture up front, but enough to facilitate the early development of value. So welcome changing requirements even late in development. This may be one of the principles that are absolutely toughest to follow and really, really, really essential. Deliver working software frequently, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, with a preference to the shorter time scale. This is this principle here. We talk about the length of the iterations. So 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. That's a shorter time scale. And I personally prefer not to go above a month. Here it says a couple of months, and if you ask me, I think this is a compromise to add that. But if it is today, like it was in the company where I was working within product management, you have a period of 9 months to a release. Well, then a couple of months, 1 or 2, maybe 3, is better than doing it in a 9-month project, even though I prefer a couple of weeks. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. Not any compromises here. The word must is quite strong, and you need to interpret that in the best of ways for your product development. What this principle talks about is that it's not a good idea to develop products in isolation. It's really, really, really good to have business people involved. And if you can do that on a daily basis, if you need to do that on a daily basis, you should do it, of course. If you can do it, it's good. But please keep in mind, have your business people and developers remembering that it's good to work together throughout the project. Maybe it's not always necessary to meet each other every day, but it's hard to say that it will hurt you. Next one, build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the job done. So the first sentence here, build projects around motivated individuals. To me, this is about thinking about what are the things that can help individuals to become motivated? What are their intrinsic drivers? Daniel Pink, for example, he talks about purpose, autonomy, and mastery. And there may be other intrinsic drivers as well. If we talk about knowledge workers, the development team members, they need to understand why we're doing this. because that can help them to get the motivation. So the product vision comes into play here, of course. And then when that is established, give them the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. So think about, for example, how much management is needed for a development team. What are all the decisions that can actually be delegated to the development team so that you as a manager or your manager doesn't need to micromanage everything, because trust them to get the job done. If we trust people, they usually do a better job, but we should not trust blindly, of course. But help individuals to become motivated, give them the environment and support they need, and then trust that they do a good job and don't interfere with all the small details. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. Today, we see more and more teams that are distributed, more and more situations where you have a development team in one location and a product owner in another location. So the challenge here is to overcome the communication problems that not being in the same room actually creates. It's not impossible, but I believe many people, they agree with me when I say that if I have to choose between distributed development and collocated development, I choose collocated. We're not always able to choose. Working software is the primary measure of progress. We mentioned definition of done before. At the end of the iteration, we will inspect the results, and that's why we talked about working product increment, working software, because if we don't have anything working, then we have not made any progress at all. So try to get progress early on so that we can measure that instead of getting risk of bad surprises late. Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. I'm not sure if I fully agree with constant pace, but so I like to talk about sustainable pace, so that we don't run too fast. So we should be able to understand what is the right pace for our development team, what is the right pace for sponsors and users so that they can give feedback and also receive the results. So this is something to think about, not only think about the development team. Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. If we have designed a solution where we can actually do incremental architecture, add to the architecture incrementally, then that will help us to be agile because we don't need to do a big upfront design, for example. If we are able to automate all our tests, if we are good at DevOps and things like that, then we are typically better suited to work according to Agile. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done. This is essential. So simple solutions is easier to maintain. It's easier to add to that. And the art of maximizing the amount of work not done is about if we have two possible ways of implementing which require the least amount of work, because then we maximize the amount of work not done. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. Instead of someone telling them, you can utilize many brains, and you give them the freedom and the power to make the decisions. And then number 12, at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. So here we have all of the illustrations, a summary of Agile principles, and you may want to note which one you find more beneficial. And I was going through these and the values of the Manifesto for Agile Software Development to give an example of what you may want to inform and educate about. And this was a very brief walkthrough. In a real setting when you want to implement Agile, you may want to spend more time talking about this and also repeatedly talk about this. Okay, so I've come to an end of my presentation, and I will now be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So you can enter questions in the chat box, and I'll be happy to answer them. If you rather want to send them to me later on, you have my email address here, and if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free to do so. Please write a note about you participating in this webinar so that I know from where the request comes. So thank you very much.